I was gonna skip this one. I'll be honest, I'll come right out and say it. I wanted no part of this. If you remember the last time I made a laminated dough, it was for the chocolate croissants, and it was a nightmare. If you're unfamiliar, a laminated dough is just very thin sheets of dough in between very thin sheets of butter. Once the butter melts in the oven, it kind of puffs up from the gases and creates that layered, crispy croissant effect that I wanted no part of this week. Yesterday, when the video was released, I was flooded with hundreds, if not thousands, of DMs and tweets and YouTube comments. So here we are. I'm gonna give it my best shot. Let's get right into this. Although this is a long process, besides the laminated dough, nothing seems too difficult. I will say that the cheeses that I have to buy are probably going to be extraordinarily expensive, but we'll see in a second. I grabbed some sugar and olive oil, whole peeled tomatoes, and low moisture mozzarella, tomato paste, crushed red pepper flakes, plain breadcrumbs, some normal flour, fontina cheese, sweet and hot supersada, lots of salted butter and fresh basil, some aged provolone, salt and pepper, oregano, onion powder, and paprika, some sliced pepperoni, some pecorino cheese, an egg, fresh garlic, some active dry yeast, Parmesan cheese, Grana Padano cheese, and some water. The only one I couldn't find was Cacio Cavallo, which is supposedly very similar to aged provolone, so I'll just double up on that one. Now we are going to start with the laminated dough, which, as you can imagine, will probably take me the longest to do, give me the most headache, most frustrations. It is a yeasted dough, so we are going to get some rise out of the layers, but the majority of those little gas pockets should come from the melted butter in the oven when it melts, if we in fact do this right. You mix all of your wet ingredients along with the salt, the yeast, and then the flour at the very end, and then you have to give this a very good kneading for at least 10 minutes. Now while I let that rise, I started to work on my butter, which is pretty much just a combination of cubed up, softened, salted butter with a ton of spices, some grated fresh Parmesan because I don't know what Parmesan powder is and I couldn't find it anywhere. I can't imagine that the fresh cheese will be much different than a powdered one for this application, so that's what I went with. And once I had that formed into a nice square, I threw it in the fridge to reharden and then began to work on my sauce. Just from the video, this looks like it's going to be a super concentrated, like aromatic, flavorful sauce with fresh garlic, freshly crushed whole tomatoes. I say concentrated too because you actually have to drain out the liquid and then cook it down into almost a paste. I can only assume she does this so the filling is less likely to leak when we're baking these up later on. Either that or there's some other technical culinary reason that my pea-brain cannot comprehend, so let me know in the comments. Once my garlic and red pepper flakes were smelling amazing and I added in my tomato paste for a few minutes, you finish this up with your tomatoes, a bit of their juices, and season with salt, oregano, and that fresh basil. I popped it in the oven for 40 minutes, and before you blend it, the biggest thing to make sure is that you pluck out the basil stems, because that'll make for an interesting texture if you do not. Alrighty, back to my dough, which has puffed up very nicely. You have to punch out all the air, and once you've got it flattened to a nice even thickness, it is time to incorporate our butter square. If any of you guys were around for the chocolate croissants, I somehow was able to get it on my first try, even though it fought me to the end. The dough ripped in multiple places, so I'm going to try my best to prevent that from happening today. The biggest thing to remember while doing this is to keep the butter as cold as possible. If you live somewhere that's really hot, you have to pop it in the fridge between every single fold, because if that butter melts, you're done for. I am pretty happy with this attempt, so I'm going to leave this in the fridge until it puffs up quite a bit as well. And in the meantime, I'm going to start working on my filling cheese mix. First thing you've got to do is something I have never done before, which is make tomato paste powder just on a cookie sheet in a dehydrator or a very low oven with the door open. Supposedly, once this is hard to the touch, you can pop it in a spice grinder or a blender like this one and blend it up until it's a nice fine powder. Now, the list of ingredients in this filling is quite extensive, to put it lightly. We're gonna start with some pepperoni and our sopressata, which I always said supersad. That could be a very Americanized version, so feel free to roast me. In addition, though, we're gonna chop up our low moisture mozzarella cheese and then begin to combine all this in a bowl, measuring each and every individual ingredient, or not. You could just throw it together if you want. The choice is up to you. I did take quite a bit of time shredding each cheese into the bowl, trying to get as close to the exact gram measurement that Claire suggested. And eventually I went in there and hand mixed everything around to get all those spices incorporated, hopefully even out the cheese throughout the mix. This is smelling really good, by the way, so I threw it in a pan and froze it until it was completely solid. The very last thing we have to prepare here is our little seasoning mix for the top of the pastry. You do have to blend up some red chili flakes. Try not to inhale it while you're doing this. And eventually combine some of your breadcrumbs, that tomato powder from earlier, onion powder, your ground red pepper flakes, paprika, some oregano, some kosher salt, and then some more fresh Parmesan cheese. I tasted a bit of this. This tastes amazing as well. I checked on my sheeted dough, which was very puffy. It was only like 2 hours in the fridge, so I'm kind of surprised at this. Hopefully it'll still be okay. You want to roll this out to a nice even thickness so you can get at least 4 to 6 squares. I tried to cut them as evenly as possible. That was easier said than done. All you've got to do now is grab your filling, chop it in 4 pieces or so, and then one by one carefully plop down some sauce, your filling block, a little bit more sauce, and then fold this up like a nice little envelope. Do not forget your egg wash around the edges. This is going to act as your glue for the dough. If you don't use this, it might fall apart. Kind of like Tasty's YouTube channel now that all their chefs are leaving. That was just a joke. They still have some amazing chefs. Forgive me, please. Anyways, once I had all 4 constructed and on my cookie sheet, the last thing you have to do is fold in those edges, give each one of them a brushing with your egg wash, a very generous sprinkle of our seasoning mix for the top, and then poke some huge holes, hopefully to allow all that steam to escape through the top instead of bursting out the sides so we don't have a cheese massacre. Maybe I shouldn't have said that and jinxed myself, because at least 2 of these did end up bursting in the oven. We do have 2 very presentable ones. If I say so myself, it's also smelling incredible in here, so let's give these a taste. The smell coming off of this is crazy good. My mouth is just drooling. It smells like if a pizzeria made Hot Pockets, but even better. This one stayed together really well. It's got nice color on the top and bottom. Cheers, everyone. Oh my god. Holy crap. The tomato sauce is like a flavor bomb. That mix of cheese is so good. The top with that like little bit of heat of the red pepper flakes. This is without question the best Bon Appetit recipe I've made. Even if you have the simplest of ingredients, some cheddar cheese and pepperoni, make this. You don't have to get all fancy with the cheeses and stuff. Make the dough, the top seasoning, and then just throw in whatever you want, because this is incredible. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, like the video for me. It helps out a lot. Follow me over on Twitter, Instagram if you don't already. Let me know what you want to see in next week's video. Other than that, have a fantastic week. I will see you right back here next time. Peace.
With the M without the AD. Flipping burgers and my money super lazy. Try and make a meal tonight, they ain't paying me. Try I supersized my life with my 18. Yeah, our style wasn't wavy, but we had a vision. We could